Hi everyone. So let's start our next video. Uh, Before starting today's topic, I just want to congratulate you for completing 30% of this series. Usually, as I mentioned, usually only 5% students finish the self-paced courses. You have already completed 30%. If you haven't completed the previous videos, you can continue to watch this video because there is no prerequisite. It's mostly like an independent video, and you can then go back and watch the previous videos. But at least since you started this video, let's promise ourselves that we'll complete this video. I'm promising myself I'll finish this series as well. So with that promise, let's move on to the topic. So uh, yeah, we've been discussing about understanding the problem statements first, right? Understanding the problem first. We should never jump into solutioning whenever we are getting a product case to solve, right? The idea is to take some time and understand the problem at hand and then jump into solutioning. So we are still talking about understanding the problem and how do we do that, right? And uh, today we'll be discussing about two components out of these seven, which are timeline and features. Let's start with the timeline. Before that, a quick recap. What are these components? These seven components more or less exhaustively cover the whole problems when the problem is a product problem. If it's a business problem, you might have different components, but in a product problem, usually these are the seven components you can ask questions regarding so that you will understand the problem itself first. So before understanding the problem, before asking those clarifying questions related to these components, you should never jump into the solutions directly because there is a high chance that you might miss the real problem itself, right? So that's the importance of these seven components. So today we'll discuss about two components out of these seven, which are timeline and features. So, so the idea is whenever in a PM interview, whenever you are getting a problem statement, you wouldn't clearly understand what is the context, what are the user pain points, what is the business goal, right? You won't clearly understand that when you hear the problem statement. So the first 10 minutes, you should actually take some time, 10 minutes time to ask 20 or 30 different questions to the interviewer, and then you might get a relevant data on maybe 5 or 10 of those questions. If you're asking 20 questions, maybe you will get some relevant data on 5 questions, right? So how do we ask these 20 or 30 questions? So if you ask 4 questions regarding each of those 7 components, you already have 28 questions at hand, right? So this is the idea of the 7 components I mentioned here. You just ask 3 or 4 questions regarding each of those components, and by the end of 10 minutes, you will have a basic understanding of the problem itself. And then from that point, you can think of solutioning. You'll get a direction. You'll understand the direction where you need to go, right? So that is the idea of this step, understanding the problem. So we are still discussing that problem. Sorry, that step. So timeline is one important component when it comes to product problems because in some problems, timeline will help you understand what exactly is the root cause or how should you plan your solutions, right? Because uh, if you don't have the context of time, you might end up focusing on a short-term solution where the interviewer might be thinking of a more like a long-term solution. So setting that particular context, the context of timeline, it's very important. And in some type of cases, it becomes really, really important. So we'll discuss on that. So when I say timeline, what does that actually mean? What can we ask about timeline? So the usual questions I ask regarding related to time or timeline is basically if it's a root cause analysis question, I'll ask since when did we start seeing this issue? So this particular question is applicable for root cause analysis majorly, and this is one of the main type of case you will get in a beginner level product manager interview. Like root cause analysis is one of the most common questions asked. And in these type of questions, I usually, because if it's like uh, it started 1 month back, let's say the drop started happening 1 month back, then we understand that okay, something really happened 1 month before, right? And since then this issue has been happening, so we can focus on that, what exactly happened before 1 month. We can focus on that, and that is the importance of asking timeline kind of questions. Another part of timeline is also we have to come up with some solution. So if we know that okay, we have to think of a solution for the next 6 months, then the solution will be very different from a quick short-term solution. Like we have to solve this in 2 weeks time. So these two solutions will be very different. So setting this as well, like timeline for the goal, right? How fast should we solve this? So this will also become important, but this will be important while you're prioritizing the solutions. If the interviewer is saying we need a solution that works for next 6 months time or 2 years time, if that is what the interviewer is saying, you can select the long-term kind of solutions. All right, you get the difference, right? So this is why it is important to ask these questions regarding timeline. So let's look at two type of cases. One is root cause analysis, like I just mentioned. I usually ask, since when did we start seeing the problem? I try to clarify that part, usually for a root cause analysis problem, because the advantage of that question itself is I can then ask for metrics. What was the numbers looking like before this happened and after this happened? For example, let's say one question is that there is some drop in usage that started happening since last 1 month. So I can take 5 different features and ask the interviewer that, okay, before 1 month, how was the usage of these features looking like? What percentage of users were using these features? And after, since 1 month, what are the numbers? So if I get these two, numbers before and after this time, what will happen is I can understand where exactly is the drop happening. Maybe people stop using one particular feature in last 1 month. If that is the reason, I can understand which is that particular feature by just asking about the metrics before and after. So that is why I usually ask these kind of clarifying questions. And another type of product case is product design. So if the question is a design type question, I usually ask about the time, because we'll be asked to design a onboarding flow or design a feature or design a whole product. In all those cases, if we know that, okay, we have only 1 month time or we have 2 years time to develop this or to test it, right? So the solution will be a bit different in both cases. Like depending on the timeline, you can think of short-term versus long-term solutions. So that is why timeline becomes important in these two types of cases. So I have written down few other questions related to time itself, which I usually ask. Like, let's say the question is about YouTube viewership. I can ask which day of the week is the viewership, maximum viewership happening? Or is there any seasonality effect, right? Like when it's football season or cricket season, does the viewership increase? So if this is not a question related to YouTube, you can pick few of these questions. But the idea is you try to think of the time itself. You can start seeing some pattern. In some cases, what will happen is this might be happening the issue might be happening very frequently. If it's happening very frequently, then you can think of why it's happening. Is it happening every week or is it happening for every users? I didn't mean users. I meant if the user is using it for one time, the issue is happening twice, right? So for each use, if this issue is happening, then there will be much more, the issue will be much more frequent. So that's the idea, like how frequently is the issue happening? And maybe you can also ask which time of the day. If it's happening every day at between 5 to 7 p.m., then you will get some insight out of it. The whole idea of asking these questions is not to get to the right answer. It is basically to eliminate the other parts and just focus on the issue itself. Once you eliminate that, okay, there is no seasonality effect. Let's say the interviewer is saying there is no seasonality effect. That means you don't even have to think about that. And if the interviewer is saying this is only happening on Mondays and only during 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., if this is what the interviewer is saying, you have the right direction now. You can focus on these two aspects, right? Why is it happening on Monday, right? So this is the idea of asking more questions. It's actually to eliminate other parts and focus on the most probable part of the problem. You will slowly, once you start asking these questions, you will slowly move towards the right solution. Yeah, and sometimes I ask this as well, like the user lifetime. How long do a typical user use the product? So this is another part of the problem. This can be a very important part. If user is only using it once in a year or something, or if the user is using it every day, you don't know, right? When you get the problem statement, you don't know answer to these questions. So the first 10 minutes should be spent on asking these questions about those components like timeline and features, all those 7 components. So you have to actually write it down and then take some 1 or 2 minutes time to just look at the data you have got. In many cases, what will happen is interviewers will say there are no seasonality effect and there is no pattern we have seen in terms of day of week. Like we don't see any patterns specifically on Mondays or something like that. There is no pattern. And maybe there's no pattern with respect to time of the day as well. Like it is very, normally distributed across like all time of the day. If that's the case, you know that you don't have to focus on this anymore. Timeline is or the seasonality, day of the week, it doesn't matter in this problem. So you can eliminate those. You don't have to think about that anymore. So that is the idea of asking these questions. So I hope you might be already having 6 or 7 questions related to time or timeline. So let's move to the next component, which is features. So features are not always very important, especially in case of design type questions. Features will become very less important. But if it's root cause analysis question, or if you are asked to build a feature or integrate a feature or something, then this particular component will become important. I'll tell you how. So yeah, so this is two most common questions I usually ask to clarify things. Let's say there is already an existing product and you are asked to either find some root cause or design a feature into this already existing product. If that's the case, understanding the most used and least used features, this will actually help us. Why? Because if we understand the most used features, this is probably the most priority feature. So whenever we are designing a new feature or flow, our flow should not actually obstruct this particular feature because this is the most priority feature, right? This is the most used feature. But if it's a very less used feature, it's fine even if your new design is, overriding this feature. It's actually fine. So this is how this will become important in some design questions. In terms of root cause analysis, the most used features are probably where the issue is happening. Uh, in in real life, this might not be the case, but in interviews, what will happen is they might ask something like the usage is going down or the engagement is dropping, something like that. If let's say the question is about drop in engagement, in an already existing product, there will be some top 3 features which are used by the users. So if you look at these top 3 features, probably the drop is happening in one of those features. This is what usually happens in interview. So if you just ask about these particular component, like which is the most used feature, or maybe the top 3 used features, and then you ask about the drop in those features, mostly the drop will be happening in one of those features. So you understand the point, right? If you get that, okay, this is a feature where the issue is happening, then you can focus on that particular feature alone. You don't have to think about anything else. So this is how you slowly move towards your solution. You understand the problem, you clarify the problem bit by bit. By each question, you are actually moving towards the right solution. I'll give you an example. Okay, in case of root cause analysis, these type of problems, you can clarify about removed features as well. Like if there is sudden drop, you can ask, did we remove any feature in last 1 month time? If the interviewer is saying yes, probably that's the issue. Or if in case of a design problem, you can clarify about the existing features to understand the current flow, user flow, and what are the use cases. According to those current user flow and use cases, you can integrate a new feature into that product itself. So if the question is about designing a new feature, you can ask these kind of questions about existing features. So just recapping, just going back, what are the 2 questions? Yeah, most used feature, least used feature, and then you can ask about removed features in terms like if this is a root cause analysis problem. If it's a design problem, you can ask about existing features. There are more questions you can ask. Yeah, did we add any feature or add any new flow? Let's say if the question is about uh, people, the activation rate has gone down. So if did we change the user flow, or did we add a new user flow or onboarding flow, something like that. So you can ask about, did we add anything new, right? It can also cause some problems. Or yeah, you can also ask about the other features in the same product. Or if it's about if it's a design problem, you can actually ask, what are the other products users use, right? What are the products that are existing in the current market? You can ask about those as well. This is again to understand the use cases, right? You are asking about the features to understand the current situation. How does the user experience the whole product? If it's about designing a new product, you can always ask about other products or features or other solutions users are using, right? So this is the summary of it. Basically, these 2 components are helpful to understand where the issue is happening, and it's also helpful to eliminate unimportant aspects. If there is no new added features or we didn't remove any feature, then you probably don't have to think of these. The issue is big, like the issue is something else. The problem itself is something else. Why is the drop happening? If the interviewer is asking that, it is not probably because of new features or removed features. It is something else. Maybe it's about some bug, technical bug, or something like that, right? So we can slowly eliminate and focus more and more on the right part of the problem. That is the whole idea of asking these questions. Yeah, let's look at one example to understand this. This is a product design problem, right? Design an MVP for a mobile app that encourages peer-based or community-driven learning. So you just first look at the keywords itself. It's an MVP, it's a mobile app. It encourages peer-based or community-driven, and then learning is another keyword. So yeah, what are the questions you can ask regarding timeline features? If you quickly think about that. You can ask time-based questions like when do the users learn usually. You can ask timeline questions. What is the timeline for this particular MVP, right? You can again ask what are other products that people use. This is related to the features component. So let's see, we can ask questions like this. 3 questions I have written. It's basically timeline to launch, and when do the users learn? Like, do they learn on weekends? They learn at night, right? And what are the features they might need, or what are the current features or current products they use? You can ask that as well. Like, how do they solve this problem right now, right? If you understand, you can design a better MVP for them. So let's say in this example, if the interviewer is telling us they are only learning on weekends, if that's the case, that also means they are going to use this MVP once in a week, right? They are not using every day. So if you understand this particular behavior, you can build something like, if you are planning to build some notification or something, you can think of it like you don't have to notify every day. Like, you don't have to try to bring the user every day to the mobile app. But yeah, you can try to bring them every week, once in a week. And the activities are going to be more on weekends, right? So these are few quick insights you will get if the interviewer is saying the users usually learn on weekends. From just that sentence, you get more insights about how this MVP is going to be, right? So this is an example of how you can ask questions about timeline and features to understand about the problem, and probably the solution will be better. Now I'll give you a homework problem. You might have seen this problem before. So it's a data and metrics type. So yeah, you have to find the root cause basically. User watch time on YouTube Shorts has dropped by 25% in the last 2 weeks, despite no major UI or algorithm changes. So what is the root cause of this? You have to find that out. But the homework is not to find the root cause. It is basically to ask questions about timeline and features. So what are the questions you will ask to understand the timeline and the features, right? Just think about it, and you can drop a comment, or you can write it down on paper. The idea is to practice along with watching this video. I'll give you some key pointers. So you can you can ask questions like, when did this start happening, related to time, right? And you can ask questions like, what are the most used features, and this is about user watch time. So you can probably ask about the journey just before opening YouTube Shorts. How is the engagement? Is the watch time for other features, long format videos, the same, or is that dropping as well? Basically, ask about the other feature, and maybe what else is the most used feature in YouTube. Is it the same drop is happening in those features as well? You can ask those questions. So think about these two components and try to come up with 5 or 6 questions in total. Now that's a homework. Basically, this exercise this is for you to practice asking these questions instead of thinking about solution itself first. Maybe whenever you are seeing this particular problem statement, you automatically is thinking about what could be the reason, how can I solve it, right? Instead, just take some 2 minutes time and think about these two components. Ask 5 or 6 questions about these components, and this practice will definitely help you in PM interviews, because that is how you slowly get to the right kind of solution. That is how you structure the whole problem and solution itself. So with that, I think today's video, we are done with it. Yeah. So congrats on completing this chapter as well. We are 40% into the series. In the next video, we'll talk about two more features. We have two more features to go. Once we do that, we will talk about the different type of problems. There are 4 type of problems which we'll cover. So we'll talk about those types of problems. So see you on the next video. Thanks for watching.